Good. Let me try summing up what you've said so far, and you can tell me if I'm full of shit or not, or close or off. Which is that the answer to the question of how, at least an answer, a beginning answer to how Game B could beat Game A, despite the fact that it's tiny today and Game A is huge and powerful, is that Game A, if it's crafted correctly, will do a better job of processing the world in a nonlinear, high complexity fashion. And even though it starts small, it will have a higher exponent. And those of us with a little bit of quantitative background know that over a long enough period of time, you can start mighty small. And if you're growing at a higher exponent, you'll eventually beat the big guy who's growing at a lower, growing in a broader sense of solving the world's problems than the bigger guy. Is that getting something near the sense of what you were trying to communicate?
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think you may have started with Game A, but it became evident that you definitely meant Game B there. And yes, so that would be that.
Okay.
And this is particularly the case when this rate versus state trade-off is so important. So if you've got a starting gate where the ability to be able to do this innovation thing, the raw material for doing the innovation, the adjacent possibilities, the phase space of possibility is now very, very large. And so the leverage of increasing your capacity to do innovation, to move the adjacent possible is very high. So if we had tried to do this Game B thing in 1750, we couldn't have gotten there because there wasn't enough stuff in the space of possibility. Even if we tried to do it in 1950, we couldn't have gotten there. But now we can, or at least in principle, it's possible that we can. And so it's kind of this weird thing where almost exactly the same characteristic that causes Game E to be so challenging, which is to say accelerating change, happens to be the same exact characteristic that drives the possibility of Game B. And we can exactly say that Game B is just designed from the get-go to be substantially better at innovation than Game A. And okay, that's actually kind of simple. It's like, okay, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how do we take a look at this thing called creative collaboration, and how do we do that thing? How do we design something which is just a whole lot better at creative collaboration, recognizing that we're now in a place where escape velocity through the innovation vector is available. We might actually be able to do something that's just so much better that it just lifts off. Let's say that Game A right now has 1 million power. And this is, I'm just going to in numbers, just re-articulate what you just said. Game A has 1 million power, and its rate of change is 100,000 per unit time. And so next unit, T plus 1, it's 1 million 1. Let's say Game B right now is starting out at 10,000 power. But its rate of change is actually something like compounding curve. So it's not 100,000 per unit time, it's 1.1 times its current number. And so it's going to take a while. For a while, 10,000 times 1.1 is not getting a lot bigger. But obviously, if you just draw the curves, there is a crossover point. And that crossover point, by the way, is a crossover point with wings, because you've crossed over, and within a not very long time after you've crossed over, you've blown right past. And not very long time after that, you've actually gone so far past that it's not even clear what the hell just happened. And we can actually be, in some sense, even very concrete about this. I think it was an SFI book, but maybe it wasn't. I think it may have been The Origin of Wealth. And there was a conversation about what it meant. Actually, maybe it was Matt Ridley's book, where they were talking about like to have been Louis XIV. And on the one hand, to have been Louis XIV at his time frame was massively, massively better than just being an average person. And on the other hand, almost everybody alive right now is better off than Louis XIV. The simple fact of, say, for example, we have toothbrushes, and obviously, telecommunications, transportation, air conditioning, indoor plumbing, antibiotics, like fill in the blank. And the rate of innovation compared to the state is one where we have all blown right by. So if you imagine that you had a choice, that Louis XIV was sitting there and he had a choice. He could either ride train A, where he gets to be Louis XIV and gets to be the top dog, but train A has a particular rate of change, or he gets on train B, and train B has a characteristic where he no longer gets to be Louis XIV. He just has to be a peer along with everybody else. But it has a faster rate of change. He may be hard pressed to make that choice. He may be like, man, I really prefer to be Louis XIV, but it's actually a better choice. if you like things like toothbrushes and indoor plumbing.
And modern dentistry in general. Whenever people talk about the good old days, I just say modern dentistry.
Right. And of course, right now, a lot of the languaging is focused on stuff like technology, like physical technology, like modern dentistry or toothbrushes. But in the context of Game B, what we notice is that a large amount of the innovation field actually has to happen at the level of people, relationships, human beings, innovation happening in the domain of how human beings are able to show up in relationship with themselves, with each other, and with nature, for the obvious reason that if all you do is run forward at a faster pace along the technology vector, you're just going to blow us up faster. So we have to actually do something. And this is okay. This is one of the reasons why I at least spend a lot of time thinking about it in terms of meta design and not in terms of just engineering. If we're going to develop something which is just a whole lot better at creative collaboration, we actually notice from the very get-go that we also have to design something that is a whole lot better at cultivating collective wisdom that is at least symmetric with, and probably more superior to, the power that we're generating through this creative collaboration. So like this is a meta design constraint.
Yep.
Game B must orient its primary innovation capacity first and foremost towards cultivating individual and collective sovereignty, which is to say wisdom and maturity and an awareness of how choices actually show up in the world, more than the rate at which it increases individual and collective power.